This video is in partnership with Autodesk. Most people think the hard part is building the project, but honestly, most of the real work happens before I make a single cut. As a small business owner, I can't afford to waste material or rebuild parts because I got it wrong the first time. Taking my sketches into AutoCAD and testing out my designs in Fusion allows me to make mistakes on my computer so I can get it right in real life. Now, every project has to begin somewhere, and for me, it's in my notes for my phone where I put down the ideas that I want to build projects for, or just fun ideas that, I think will translate well to a YouTube video or a project. Once I have those initial thoughts laid out, I then bring everything into the sketchbook. Now, the sketchbook has changed over the years. It used to be just a pencil and paper, but obviously now we have technology, so I move everything into an iPad. So as you can see, I start with a rough dimension for what I think the size of the piece should be. Then from there, I write some notes about what I want my design goals to be as far as the aesthetics for the piece. And here I wanted to be brutalist meets LTOR and create some secret storage along the way. My goal with the lumber species was to mix some sapwood and heartwood and make everything just feel heavy. I wanted this to be a really weighted piece. And when I come over here, you can see that I have my design for my splayed feet. This is another one of those things that over time changed and shifted a little bit, but I think that the overall design for this piece stayed pretty true to what I wanted to accomplish here. So once I'm happy with my initial sketch, I take my drawings out of my sketchbook and bring them into AutoCAD. What AutoCAD allows me to do is take my sketch and then really finesse those dimensions. I really like to start working in a plan view or a top-down view, a side profile, and a front view. This just really helps me work out the silhouettes for my designs before I go ahead and bring them into Autodesk Fusion and start laying out the model. And I like starting things in AutoCAD when I'm figuring out silhouettes and proportions because it's faster to iterate on the overall shape before I start building the actual geometry in Fusion. At this stage, I'm basically trying to answer the question, does this thing actually look good? Which is a lot cheaper to solve here than after I've spent 3 hours modeling details I'm just going to change anyway. Also, this is woodworking, so changing your mind halfway through is basically part of the design process. Once I'm happy with my silhouettes, I'll take my parts over to Autodesk Fusion. Now, what this allows me to do is to really flesh out the design so I can go one part at a time and figure out what those final dimensions are going to be. A lot of times I come in here and I'll put down 1 or 2 parts and I'll realize that my perspective or my proportions aren't quite right. It's really difficult to kind of wrap your head around what pieces are going to look like in 3D for the first time. And that's why I like to bring them into a system like Fusion so that I can see what those pieces are going to look like before I actually build them. The other great part is that if I want to break down the parts one at a time, I can go through and I can hide my different pieces once I have everything assembled, and I can see how my joinery is actually going to come together. So on this piece here, we had a couple of through dados, and I really want to make sure that I capture all those final dimensions in the design. Now, the other thing is that a lot of people say that a plan is just kind of a rough outline for how a project's going to turn out. But when you get good enough in the shop, the plans are actually super accurate. So if I take this piece and I say, hey, I want to know what the length is going to be, I know that 13.5 inches is going to be the width of my shelf here. I'm going to cut that workpiece down to like 13.75 for my rough cut, and then finally trim down to 13.5 inches. When you use a program like Autodesk, you can actually dial in those dimensions right away. So you don't have to think about it. You don't have to go back and forth. And as we all know, I hate woodworking math. So when I don't have to think about the math and all I have to do is measure, it makes things a lot easier. Now, the other thing is when I'm designing different parts, like these feet, for example, I like to be able to see them in space. Again, it's kind of difficult to wrap your head around what these pieces are going to look like at the end without seeing them in a 3-dimensional form. But this one in particular, I knew that I wanted it to be really stout and feel weighted. I wanted the base to feel heavy. I wanted it to feel like something that had some mass to it. I chamfered out the base itself so that it kind of ran into the feet and added more of that visual weight to the base, making sure that it felt like it was going to be a heavy, cumbersome piece to move. Once I've got the design for these feet figured out in Fusion, I can start transferring all those dimensions onto actual blocks of wood. And this is where Fusion really helps me out, because I can see all those measurements and angles in real time instead of just guessing and hoping for the best. Which, to be fair, is still a pretty common woodworking strategy, just not usually the preferred one. Now, I'm not going to go through the full process of how these feet came together in this video since the entire build is already live on the channel. But if you do want to see all the details, the mistakes, and significantly more sawdust, make sure you go check that out. And that's pretty much the entire process from idea to finished piece and how using Autodesk helps me get there. If you guys want to see more detail on how I use AutoCAD and Fusion throughout my builds, let me know down in the comments. But honestly, the coolest part of building furniture like this are the reactions you get from the people you make it for. So thanks for watching, and as always, I knew this would work, and I'll see you next time.